Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road. Today, you get to hear from my longtime mentor and friend, Steve Longbrake. I just love Steve, and I'm so eager for you to hear how God has worked in his life through triumph and tragedy, and now in marketplace ministry to draw others to Christ. Steve, thank you so much for being with us today. My mentor. I can't believe this. I don't know why it took 300 shows to get you on.
Well, I'm assuming that you had a lot of better people.
No, that's not possible. Talk about growing up in Ohio.
Okay. Yeah. Growing up in Alger, Ohio, 900 people. Dad worked at a steel foundry in Lima, and Mom worked hard at home. And they loved each other every day. And I've said often, I think what they did for us in loving each other the way they did really grounded us as kids. We were so secure, no concerns that things weren't going to be the way they were supposed to be. Didn't hear them fight. I mean, they argued, but never a fear that they were going to split up or anything like that. And I say often to couples, it was really healthy for Dad to love my mom more than he loved me. And for my mom to love my dad more than she loved us. We raise up motherhood a lot, and we should. It's natural. Moms have to choose to love their husband more because it's natural to love their kids.
Think about that foundation that you had that very few have today.
Yeah, I know.
And how that's affected how you've impacted other people.
You know what? I didn't realize it. I had no idea that it was going to be like that. But my kids tell me all the time that for me to have grown up in the home I grew up in, and then them to grow up in the home they grew up in, not normal. They don't bump into many people that have had the kinds of upbringing that I experienced.
I think it's Michael Medved who researched maybe a couple decades ago, and he found out that 75% of the children live with both biological parents, that it was the same 25% getting divorced again and again. And I think that number, that 75% of children living with their biological parents, has decreased incredibly in the last couple decades. I think it's at least down to 60 probably.
Yeah.
But it's just unique. It's just unique that you
had
is.
That. And I know there are a lot of families that have been able to pull it off. Some needed to go through a divorce for one reason or another, and they've still been able to be really stable and love the Lord and raise their kids well. And I know that's true, but I also know my folks didn't have to think about that, and I didn't either. It was just, it seemed normal, and it isn't.
At what point did you realize you were a great athlete?
I never realized I was a great athlete, but I was a good athlete. I was one of the guys that did all sports pretty well, but I know this much. If you play anything long enough, you reach your plateau. And I can remember, man, I'll never forget this. I got to play basketball with a bunch of NBA and ABA guys that were home for the summer in Columbus one year.
And how old are you?
I was 22.
Okay.
And it took about 10 minutes for me to realize I could not play with them.
That's just a whole different level, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was your faith or church background growing up?
Yeah, Mom took us to a little church in our town. There were 2 Methodist churches in our town of 900 people. A lot of other churches
First
too.
and Second United Methodist?
One was First, the other was Central.
Okay.
Central was the wood frame church that we went to, and the other one was a really nice brick church.
Okay.
No, I tell you, man, I had my Sunday school teachers from the time I was able to walk invested in me in incredible ways. I remember them now. I can tell you their names. And they, week after week, told me the truth and relayed the Bible stories that I needed to learn to stay interested. And I'm indebted to those women. One of them, I have her family Bible. She left it to me. In there she wrote, I think Steve's going to be a preacher someday.
She was right. There's something about growing up in the church that gives you a foundation and roots that, I'll just say this way, you can always return to, and that you will probably return to after testing that
Yeah.
everything that you learned.
Yeah.
You kind of went through a testing process in college.
Yeah. I wasn't going to class, and I wasn't studying, and I wasn't going to church, but I did play a lot of ball.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, and I met lifelong friends from that basketball team and others, and I met my wife there.
Had you surrendered your life to Christ prior to that?
I had one of those 30 times. I don't know which time it was when I was a kid, but really strayed away from that when I went away to college. But every night I was struggling with guilt. The Spirit of God just continued to convict me. And finally, after I got out of college, I just said, okay, you're right. I do know you. You are in me. I'm going to yield to you. I'm going to live for you.
Wow.
But all through college, I wasn't doing that.
So do you remember when you met Renee?
I saw her across the bookstore when I was a junior, because that's when she came to Capital. And then I met her. I don't think I've ever told you this.
Mm-mm.
I met her. I was at, it was Black Emphasis Week at our school, and I was really interested in civil rights for African American friends of mine. Mm-hmm. And I went to this, there was a speaker that was invited, and she was really coming down hard on white males. And I was the only white guy in the whole audience. And afterward, I was leaving, and Renee came up and said, I bet that was a pretty tough night for you. And that's how I met her.
Really?
Yeah.
What year would that have been?
1972.
So you got married a year later?
Yes. Yeah, we got married in August of 73.
And what did you decide to do for a career?
Well, she started working at a Christian school in near Columbus called Worthington Christian School, introduced me to some guys that discipled me for 5 years, and I started working there. And they hired me. I was going back to school. I'd graduated. I was going back, and so I was working at Roadway unloading trucks on the midnight shift, and then a janitor at the church and school during the day, and junior high basketball coach. And that I started that in 1975.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
How long did you do life like that?
I did that until about a little over a year.
And then what happened? You decided...
Then I got a job there at Worthington Christian School. They hired me. I was a really good custodian. And so they hired me to be the assistant to the administrator.
Oh, that goes together, doesn't it? The facility's going to be clean.
Absolutely.
And did you... were you getting your master's in administration?
No, I went back to school to get an education degree because I wanted to coach and teach. I had a poli-sci degree, and I went back to get a comprehensive social studies degree. I could teach 7 different subjects in the state of Ohio with this education degree.
And did you serve as assistant to the administrator for a couple years?
Yes, 4 years. I left there in 79.
And where'd you go?
Went to Blackhawk Christian School in Fort Wayne.
You got to talk about how that happened.
Okay. I was fishing, actually, and Dave Jeremiah called and talked to Renee. We had met, and I'm not sure how we knew each other, but we'd already met. He called over there and asked a couple people if they knew anybody that could coach, and they said he was checking me out. And so, yeah, Renee and I had a job offer in Dayton, and we were planning on going to Dayton to work at Dayton Christian School. But Dave asked us to come over. We came over and interviewed. I remember I had to play. Dave brought his basketball stuff, and I had some stuff. We had to play a game. I had to play against a bunch of guys to find out whether I could play or not in order to be the coach. That was part of my interview.
Including David Jeremiah?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was fun, and we had a lot of fun. He was an interesting man. But what was really funny, they put us up in a motel that was across from Seifert's on Lima, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I had loved Seifert's potato chips growing up, and I used to take them to Columbus and Renee and I would just gather up a bunch of Seifert's chips because we couldn't buy them in Columbus. And we opened the drapes that we'd been there at night, so we hadn't seen the place. And when she stood there and saw Seifert's across the street, she said, "This is home."
It's a sign from God.
God's called us to Seifert's.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So what was your first role at Blackhawk?
I was a teacher and assistant administrator and basketball coach.
And how long did it take before you were the superintendent? Or
2 years I did that, and then the administrator left, and they asked me if I would take his place, so that was 1981.
And you did that for 25 years?
I was there a total of 24 years, so yeah.
What's amazing to me is in that time period, the incredible multiplication effect that you and your team and the teachers' lives have had on probably thousands of lives.
You know what? God chose to bring the right people. I didn't go find these folks, but they showed up. And when we got really quality people, because we had other really quality people, everybody wanted to stay. And the longer you have the quality people stay, the more influence they have, the more they influence the younger teachers as they're coming in. And it just got better and better and better.
What's your best coaching experience story?
I think my best coaching experience story isn't it's funny, it's not the best maybe. We walked into the locker room at halftime, we'd had a really bad half. And I was just going after it, telling these guys, you were lazy, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I could tell they all had a little smirk on their face. It made me mad. I got more and more vocal. And suddenly I said, what is wrong with you guys? And Rick Zare, who was on that team at the time, Rick Zare said, Coach, your pants are unzipped. And that kind of changed the mood, man. Everything got a little different in the locker room after that.
Oh,
that's one of my best experiences I had. It didn't matter what we did as far as what the scoreboard said to me much. Sometimes it did, because we had really good teams sometimes. Most of it, though, I had a chance to invest in those guys in ways that hardly anybody else has a chance to invest in people.
There's a unique surrender of the will that happens between player and coach that's very difficult to describe, and a coach who stewards that well for the kingdom can have an incredible positive impact, don't you think?
Yep. Yeah, I'm thankful I've had a chance to do that.
Did you come up with some leadership principles along the way as you were leading the school?
One of my favorite sets of principles is just scripture with some H's added to it. And I really found it because I wanted to teach my son what was important. He was a very frustrated athlete. He was very good, but frustrated. And if anybody made a mistake while he was pitching or if he was on the basketball court, he was expressive about that. And Renee and I were both troubled about it. And he was probably 10. And I said, Josh, this is how we're going to evaluate you, man, for the rest of your athletic life. I said, first of all, there are 3 H's that we're going to sit down and talk about. We'll enjoy the baskets you make, the home runs you hit, the good pitching that you do. We'll enjoy all that. We're not going to ignore all that, but I'm not going to evaluate you as a person based on any of that. This is how I'm going to evaluate you. And I said, I want you to honor the Lord. That's the first H, and your mom and dad. And I said, if you disrespect or show dishonor, or you bring shame to our God or us, I'm going to deal with you on that. We're not going to tolerate that in any athletic event. And I said, and then you are going to work hard. You're going to hustle. That's the second H. I said, so I'm going to evaluate you. How hard did you work in each of those events? And now we're going to talk about that. So hustle, that was the second one. And the third one was, I'm going to expect you to be humble in victory and defeat. Both of those were hard for him. They're hard for most people. But we did that. And so after every game, that's the stuff we'd talk about. And he worked harder than anybody I've ever seen. And I was so proud of him.
That's awesome.
So with Stephanie, our daughter, same kinds of things in different ways. She didn't do it on the athletic field, but those were the things that were important to us, and we passed those on. One of my big paydays, 9th grade JV basketball game, his first JV game at home. He came out on the court. I was sitting, this is teary, this is weird. I was sitting on the bench there on the bleacher. On the back of his shoe, it said H, H, H.
Oh, my word.
And I thought, okay, Lord.
You got it. Oh.
So he owned that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think you told me about the time Stephanie, when she was a little girl, you knew that she had the desire to be on stage, and she had a small part in a play, and she did the play several times.
Yeah.
Can you describe how she handled
Yeah,
it?
and every time she exited the stage after her part, it was a slower exit.
Got out there longer and longer.
She had to move a picture or dust a little something, or so she could have a little more stage time. She used to stand in front of our fireplace that had a glass front on it and twirl and spin, change outfits, look at those. She loved to perform from the time she was 3. Man, I enjoyed that so much with her.
I actually met you before I was at Blackhawk with you. And you had just finished going through one of the most horrific things anybody could ever go through. I'd like you to just tell that story, talk about how you found out there was an issue and how it unfolded.
Yeah. Renee was 43, and she found a little lump on her breast. And I remember the next morning, she hadn't told me about it that night, but the next morning she said, there's this little lump. She goes, it's really small. She said, what do you want me to do? And I said, well, I want you to go to the doctor. So she went to, Marv Eastland was our doctor. And sure enough, after enough testing, nobody was concerned, but they thought we ought to do mastectomy, and they did. But the type of cancer happened to be a very, very fast-growing, accelerating cancer. And we did everything we could, and we experienced an incredible year of marriage. We went deep. We laughed hard.
You did everything together.
Yeah.
I think you told me that was one of the most intimate things going through that with her that you could have with any person.
Yeah. We shared all that together. And man, she just didn't get better. She said to me one night in bed, she said, maybe this is an answer to our prayers. And I said, what? And she said, that I'm dying and not getting better. I said, what do you mean? And she said, before the kids were born, we used to pray all the time, God, whatever it takes, if we have children, whatever it takes for them to really walk with you, that's what we want. She said, we meant that. She said, maybe this is what it takes for our kids.
Oh my goodness.
Or for somebody else. She was serious. I said, well, I'm not there. I don't want to go there. I'm not ready for that. But that's how mature she really was and is. And then, a little over a year after we found that lump, she passed. And it was an amazing time. Kids were 12 and 14 at the time.
So you're a single dad at 44?
Yeah.
How in the world do you get through that?
I would have said that I probably couldn't have kept my job and done that if you'd asked me that 5 years before. Looking back on it, what I realized was, in His providence, God does things. There were ladies in the church that really were concerned for me. So they'd bring food. Or there was one lady that cleaned our house. I paid her to clean some things. She did so much more than I paid her to do. Jill Denny's her name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And she did our laundry. So I got help. And one of the things I've said to churches when I've had a chance to talk about this, it's very natural for women to take care of single men. But single women need as much help.
Yeah.
And we don't really consider them as needy.
No.
I got a lot of support. And all the teachers at the school, you can imagine.
Yeah.
But everybody raised my kids,
Oh, that's cool.
Everybody
when you
helped
think
me
about
raise
it,
my kids.
That picture.
Yeah.
They turned out pretty well, too.
Yeah, they're doing great.
So how did your path intersect with Nancy?
Yeah. So I was single for a couple years, and a lady that used to go to Blackhawk called me. She had purchased Nancy's home in Auburn, and she called and said she'd met a lady that she thought I ought to meet. I was getting a few phone calls like that then, and I didn't want to do that. And I said, thanks, but not interested. And she said, well, can I call you back later? And I said, sure. And a month later, she called me, and she called me for 5 months in a row, once a month.
And you had no idea what Nancy looked like,
No.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been month 1
She was
if I'd known what she looked like.
Right. She was my bus driver, and every boy thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yeah. Yep.
So
She's
fifth
prettier
month.
inside, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So 5th month.
Yeah, so I said, okay. And Nancy finally agreed, too, because Carol was telling her the same thing. And so we said we'd just go to dinner with them, and we went to Triangle Park. And so I'm sitting in there with that couple waiting for her to come. I'd never seen her, and I'd never even asked what she looked like. I wasn't that interested. But as soon as she walked in the door, I was interested.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we had a great time. I said, what have you been doing the last 20 years? And she said, well, 17 of those I've been driving a school bus for DeKalb Community Schools. So, yeah, that was a great start. And we knew in 2 weeks' time, we'd ask each other everything we wanted to know. But we needed to wait a while because Abigail was going to get married in May.
Her daughter.
And so we waited until after that. We got married in June. This was in late November that we met, 18 years ago this month.
That has flown by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're older, Mitchell.
I am. I didn't have any hair then either. You decided, we preached together for a while with Kelly at Blackhawk, and
that was a blast.
It was absolutely incredible.
We did it together.
Oh, it was fun.
I really enjoyed it.
Do you get stopped every now and then by people that say, oh, I wish I could see that again, or I wish I could hear you guys?
They
loved
liked
it.
that.
Yeah, they did. I thought it was really cool, the interaction and stuff.
There were a lot of people that liked that.
You felt a prompting to advance the cause of Christ even outside the 4 walls, and you were involved in starting Race to Win Ministries.
Yeah.
And you had tremendous success in investing in guys in the marketplace. There's something really unique about your ability to take the Word of God and make it practical, because you grew up on a farm, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything's just practical. You can relate to anybody, anything. You don't judge anybody. I remember you met with a bar owner about how to advance the cause of Christ.
Strategically plan his business.
Isn't that amazing?
Build the kingdom in his bar, yeah.
I mean, you've had amazing
He ended up having to sell that. He went under.
But that leads to you eventually working with Ambassador.
Yeah.
And you start consulting.
Yeah.
And you consult a group in Warsaw. And tell me what happens there.
Yeah. We met some guys from Warsaw. They actually had called us because they'd been engaged with some guys from Ambassador. And the 3 Silvius brothers and Craig Snow. And they called and wanted to know if we would want to entertain partnering together somehow. And so I was part of a team that investigated Silvius Insurance Group in Warsaw. And I can remember I went home. I met Scott Silvius is the eldest brother, and then Cam Silvius and Tyler Silvius and Craig Snow, the CEO of Cedar Holdings, the holding company. Mm-hmm. And I went home that night and I said, Nance, if I was 40, I'd be beating their door down to help build the kingdom over there in Warsaw, Silvius Insurance Group. I said, I love those guys. They love the Lord. They want to have fun doing business, and they see all that platform as a kingdom building opportunity. And we built a relationship. We didn't end up doing a partnership at all with Ambassador, but long story short, I ended up getting a chance to go over there. And I can remember saying to them, you guys, I'm 63 years old now, not 43. And one of them actually wrote a little paper saying, well, yeah, that's why we'll take a risk. It's not going to be very long. It's been great. It's been better than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
Yeah. The opportunities to share Christ and invest in the community in Warsaw, invest in the community in our state, in our country, and around the world, financially and with hours to put our time in, and to build the kingdom, to share the gospel, and then be able to have a chance. I have a chance to work with all these people that we work with all the time, and I get to talk about what's important to me. And they pay me for that.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
You got a beautiful home.
Yeah.
Loved the lunch we had there. Beautiful scenery. It's just, you got a beautiful life. It's interesting, pastors used to probably spend a lot more time at the farms, in the marketplace with the people, and it would have felt much more practical.
Yeah.
You're taking that to its ultimate practice, I think, to be out there where they are,
You know
just
what?
like Jesus did, just like Paul did.
Yeah, I hope that's right. I loved Christian education by choice. I had a passion for all those men and women in the marketplace that I got to deal with there and help them think about how to live out their faith in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So when Race to Win opportunity came up to me, a guy in Columbus, a guy I played ball with, called me and said, I'd like to invest in you doing something else. He said, I'll pay you a salary to do whatever God brings up.
Oh, my.
So that's how Race to Win got started.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So I wanted to invest. I have a passion for marketplace ministry. You know that.
I know
You
it.
and I got a chance to do that together and Race to Win a lot.
We sure did. Steve, God put you in my life at just the right time. You're not old enough to be my dad, but you were that voice of wisdom at a transition period for me, and for that I'll be forever grateful. One night, this will mean nothing to you probably, but you and Stephanie talked about a verse that you had memorized as a family, and it was Psalm 32:1. And I know that if you say, hey, how are you today? And a student would say, good, you'd say, no, you're not. You're forgiven.
That's right.
I'd like you to read Psalm 32:1.
Yeah, blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered.
And I think for the people watching, could you just
Yeah.
tell them
Yeah.
what that verse means?
Yeah. I'm really, really under a lot of pressure about my past because I have regrets. I have a lot of regrets, and I have no guilt. I'm full of regret because I did things to other people, to my Lord, that cost a lot, hurt people a lot. I have tremendous regrets, but through the blood of Christ, I'm forgiven. I got no guilt, and that is worth everything.
Amen. Steve, thank you so much. I love you, man.
I love you too, man.